Hello and welcome to Stories from Foster Care, a brand new podcast series from the Irish Foster Care Association. My name is Niamh Barrett, and over the course of this series I will be meeting people from all walks of life who have different experiences of foster care in Ireland. Our guest today on Stories from Foster Care is Anne McCluskey, a foster carer and a retired school principal. We talked about Anne's journey as a foster carer and her perspectives on supporting foster children through the education system. Anne has a wealth of experience over many years. We could have talked for hours.
And I think that is a hard thing at the moment. I think with COVID, with climate change, we're all very, very aware that the world is a very problematic place at the moment. But just to remember that there is still beauty in the world and there is still kindness in the world. And to help ourselves experience that so that we can deal with children who have experienced terrible things and are still experiencing terrible things, to have compassion for them and to be able to meet them with a full heart.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Stories from Foster Care. Okay, Anne, you're very welcome to the podcast.
Thanks very much, Niamh.
Thank you for joining us. You're a foster carer and a retired school principal. You've seen foster care from many angles. And I guess the thing I'm curious about is how you became a foster carer in the first place. Often when I'm speaking with foster carers, they've had an experience sometimes in their childhood that has kind of moved them in that direction later on in life. What was it for you?
Well, that wasn't the case for me really, but myself and my husband, we were friends long before we became a couple, and I suppose when we realised that we wouldn't have our own children, we thought about immediately about fostering, because we were both very much working in disadvantaged communities, and we had spoken a lot about parenting, and while we really wanted to be parents, we recognise that you don't have a right to be a parent as such. It's a privilege to be a parent, but children have a right to have parents. And we thought, well, we could maybe have a role here and meet our own desires to be parents, and offer a home for children that couldn't be cared for at home at their time. So I think that was our journey really. We didn't explore adoption at that stage, but thought that maybe fostering would lead to adoption.
So how and when did you start?
So 17 years ago, and we had said from the beginning that we would hope to be long-term foster carers, even though we recognise that the ultimate goal was that children will be reunited with their birth parents. And I suppose that was our wish for our children, because it certainly was their very strong wish when they came to us. So 17 years ago, they came to us in the autumn of 2004. It was a very exciting time, I have to say, a very exciting time for us. So they were siblings, and because we didn't have our own children, we had said we would like to take a sibling group, because we thought it might be difficult for one child to be placed with us when we didn't have our own children. We weren't like as a ready-made family. So we were making a family. So it was a steep learning curve for all of us, I think. And then they came to us, so they had been placed separately prior to coming to us, and then they were reunited with us. So they came 8 weeks apart, and that was good. So it was very exciting. It was very exciting for them, planning, so for my son, planning for his sister to move in, and for us getting the place ready for both of them.
The steep learning curve. Can you say a little more about that?
Oof. Well, everything from just realising, that one day you just think, oh, I've forgotten the milk and I need to go to the shops, to realising, I need to get it, I need to bring the child with me. I mean, I think parents of new babies are familiar with this, but we hadn't had any of that. But I suppose when you're talking about a 6-year-old, getting a 6-year-old to agree to get into the car with you because you've forgotten the milk, that focuses your mind. And especially a 6-year-old who's had a lot of disruption, very strong-minded, and they're just not going to get in. So all of that was a steep learning curve, learning how to cope with all of that. And the pre-approval training, while it was very good and we made some good friends from that, good supports and good friends, it really, I think, post-approval training would have been very useful at that stage, just to go back and say, well, now here's real people. This is not the theory, but here are real children, and let us think about how we can better support them. So I think that was the steep learning curve. They came with, it was very difficult for them, really. It was very, very difficult for them. And while we thought we had set up a beautiful place for them, it was a loss. And definitely you could feel that very strongly for them. So they had been in another placement before they came to us, a short-term placement, but which had gone on, as it does for very many children who come into foster care. It had gone on a very long time, possibly too long. So they were just 5 and 6 at the time that they'd come into care, and they had been in care for almost a year up to that, 11 months. And then those attachments or connections were severed, and they were placed with us. So I remember my daughter, my son, just telling us she hated the toothpaste, she hated the bathroom, she hated the toothbrush, and you think you're getting all nice new stuff and you're making it as child friendly as possible. And, for us that was all very exciting and cute, getting all these kiddie stuff around our house. But for her, it was different. And for young children, they want everything to be the same. They want the smells to be the same. They want the sounds to be the same. They want everything to look the same, to be familiar, to be routine. And this wasn't. This was a break from everything that had been familiar to them. So that was very tough on them. And it was very tough on us because scary. Because you just think, I don't know, can I really, I've upset this child just by virtue of not knowing them. And I think that's something that was kind of a shock to the system, this sensation of not knowing your child. And I think I've done a lot of work over the years, and really, I suppose, more work since the children have come, then I should have done a lot more work before they came on attachment. And I think that's very strong in the whole attachment world, or the understanding of attachment, is this sense that the caregivers really know their child. They're really attuned to their child, every facial change, every like, dislike. So they really know their child. And we really didn't know this child. And I think that's a useful insight, I think, for other foster carers, to kind of say, okay, be okay with that, because you can't know them, but it is about getting to know them, and it is about letting the child know that you really are there to learn to know them.
And how did that play out over the years that followed? Did that sort of come up every once in a while, that there'd be periods of being settled and then periods of being less settled? But how did it play out for you and the children you were fostering?
We were lucky in that they did stay with us, even though I suppose, every year at the Child in Care review, you do think about this, and what if they won't stay with us, or what if they can't stay with us? Then I suppose when they get into their mid-teens or late teens, you realise, they're here to stay. So looking back, I think we would have done a lot of looking back as a family and remembering back. And I think, without you realising it, it gets easier. So, but settling, do you have periods of unsettled? And then I'd say it's more the other way around, that there's little moments of joy, happiness in every week, and then they become more frequent. I think that's how I would look at it. And I think the building of memories, that for us was really important. So the building up of memories of holidays together, memories of Christmases together, memories of birthdays together, that was really how it worked, But in the beginning, there wasn't really a feeling that the children were becoming more settled. We often wondered, were they becoming more settled? It just seemed to be very, very difficult. And I think that's, I think one thing, my husband, certainly, I would have to pay tribute to him. He was very strong on kind of being present for the good moments. So I think that's really important, being present for the good moments. So really enjoying the good moments and not thinking, oh, well, this is not going to last and, there'll be another tantrum in the next 10 minutes. But just kind of really laughing and enjoying those good moments. And then, when the bad moments come, and in the beginning, there probably, you could say, more bad moments than good moments, just to not panic about them and not think too far in the future. And I think I did have a tendency more than he did to think too far in the future, to think, oh my goodness, if we can't cope with this now, how will we cope with it in 4 years' time when the children are bigger, stronger, or, not playing on the road, or we can't insist that they play near where we can see them. So, I would have thought ahead to kind of dangers that were ahead. And he was much better at being present and kind of saying, okay, well, bad at this particular moment, but, we're going to the park later and it'll be good then.
Yeah, great. It's important for your own resilience as a foster carer, isn't it, to really notice those moments?
Very much, and it's very important for the children to kind of, feel that there's those parts to them as well, for them to realise, yeah, they can make you laugh, they can make you delight in them, they are delightful, and to really be present for that delight, not to forget it, because it may be very fleeting in the beginning and it certainly does get longer. And the holidays, I do think the holidays really were huge asset in our kind of family arsenal. They just, they were a time when we all went away to a neutral venue as such, and we just had time for the kind of normal things in life. So you're planning to go to the beach, which beach are you going to go to, and what are you going to eat, choosing what to eat. So not the busyness of the school day, not the business of the working day, not the busyness of the housework or anything like that, just time together and making decisions together as a family on a holiday. So I think they were enormously beneficial and healing.
Yeah, sounds wonderful. Is there something that would have supported you that you would like to see other foster carers receiving as well? Like you mentioned post-approval training, for example. But is there anything else that you feel is needed and is maybe still lacking to help foster carers navigate all of this?
Yeah, I think post-approval training, or a post-approval support, really, So we did go into support groups, but I think at the time everybody felt very unsupported. So obviously if you go into a support group with other people, then sometimes you can hear people really floundering in their fostering situation, and that can be very scary and unnerving. Our big support for us, I think, was extended family. So they really embraced us and our children and included us in everything. And so that became our social life for a number of years. So if we were, if we needed to socialise with other adults, we went and stayed in their house, and we all camped in their house overnight, where our children all played together and, were very much included in everything. And it was our sanity, really. I think post-approval support, I think, would be really important because, maybe for people to talk about, well, you remember we spoke about regression, going back to an earlier period in child development, that somebody would talk you through that when you were experiencing it maybe with our own children. That we would know how to cope with it instead of, we kind of maybe forgot completely that we had covered that in pre-approval training. But when you're doing it as a theory, it's very different to when a young child is presenting you with it.
Sure. When it's actually happening in front of you,
When it's actually
very
happening
easy to
in
forget.
front of you.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. And you've experienced foster care and, the care of children generally through your role as a school principal. And you're a passionate advocate for the rights of children in school and especially foster children. Where do you stand now? What's your view now, looking at the system? What needs to happen there?
Well, I think huge number of things need to happen, but certainly as a school principal, I would have seen foster carers and their children in the school, mainly relative foster carers, and I would have to say these are my heroes. By and large, they're grandmothers who have taken on to support their grandchildren when their own parents weren't in a position to care for them. And they have done amazing work. So I don't know if any of them will ever hear this podcast, but I hope they know that they will know who they are. I mean, really astounding level of courage, work, vision for these grandchildren who have come into their care, and they are more aware than anybody really of the tragedy behind them coming into care. But I think also what they bring is a knowledge that sometimes foster carers who are not related to the children have to remind themselves of us. These are really loved by their birth parents, and it's really important to remember that this is a huge tragedy for them, for the birth parents, that they haven't been in a position to care for them, and that their children have been taken into care, and that is a huge rupture that can be very deep in the child, very deep in the parents. So for grandparents or grandmothers, I think it was that I would have seen anyway, grandmothers taking on the foster care of their grandchildren. They're huge heroes and did this work with great humour and really have made an enormous difference to their grandchildren's lives, or to some children's lives. So I saw that and think that sometimes they don't think of themselves as foster carers and don't draw on the supports that are available. So that was one thing that I would worry about. In terms of the system, I think there needs to be a huge piece of work done. I think there's no acknowledgement that foster children that the Department of Education or the education system has any responsibility for children in care in the education system. And I think if we look back and see about children who came into institutional care in the past, okay, we all tut and shock horror at the terrible things that happen. But if we're not recognising them and tracking what's happening in our educational system now to children who are in the care of the state, I think we are in danger of terrible things happening or terrible neglect happening. So these children come in and they have particular vulnerabilities with regard to education. They, have come with, again, what I said before, but this huge rupture that's happened in their lives, which has a very long-lasting effect and can have a very long-lasting effect on their lives, and they will need support and particular types of support in order to be able to make a success of their lives in education. And a good school placement with good supports at school and good relationships with the foster home and with the child and the child's birth parents in some cases, that can make an enormous difference to a child's life. It will make an enormous positive change to the child's life. Conversely, if it goes badly and if there's a lot of change, if there's a lot of disruption, if a placement breakdown results in a school breakdown, a school placement breakdown, well, it's devastating for the child. It's devastating for any work that's been done with them, any relationships that they've built up. And I would have had the experience of a child in our school who, after he was taken into care, continued to attend our school, and I really think that made a big difference. It was great for us as the school, who had very close relationships with them. It was great for us to see how he was and how, as things became easier for him at home, where he had more of his physical care needs met and more of his developmental needs met, how he was able to respond better in education. And because he had that continuity in school, because he had teachers who knew him already, you know, he didn't have to establish relationships with the teachers and with the children. He just had to, you know, he had all his energy to focus on his home placement and the changes that he had to cope with there. I do believe it made a big difference. So I think, you know, if there is a school placement breakdown alongside a foster care placement, it just is devastating for the child, and for them to try and remember and to try and put the energy into developing relationships. And I think children don't. And in some cases, you know, they get blamed for that. So then, you know, there may be a lack of understanding of the behavioural difficulties or the learning difficulties that can result from developmental trauma. And I think we are really only learning about the impact of developmental trauma on the global development of a child. And I think it would be very useful if teachers got some of this in pre-service training and in-service training, if they got some understanding of how developmental trauma can impact on behaviour, learning and on relationships. And they would be better able to support the children. So I think the first thing that I would like to see happening would be for children who are in care in our education system to be tracked, and that data is gathered so that we know where these children are. We know, are they succeeding in school? Are they staying in the same school? And if they're not, how are their records being transferred? You know, that there's not a rush to assessment. Maybe there's a time allowed for them to settle down, but that the schools are supported to support these children in that settling in period. And then that schools will recognise their vulnerabilities and will be supported to meet that particular need, so that it doesn't impact hugely on their educational outcomes. Because if they don't succeed in education, then I think, you know, their life chances are really very limited. And I think we know this. There was a study in 2019, the Peter McFerry Trust and the Centre for Educational Disadvantage did a study onto users of the hostels into young men, and there was a disproportionately high number of those service users had come through the care system or had experience of the care system, and their memories or experiences of education, you know, really have a lot to teach us, and it would really back up the evidence that's coming from the UK, where evidence is gathered, or data is gathered, that it can be a very problematic place for children in care, and that where primary school, where a child is with one teacher all day, there tends to be a relationship, some relationship of trust. But in post-primary school, if there isn't somebody allocated to establish a relationship of support with that child, that they can go from one problematic encounter to another in the school, and they can find themselves being suspended, excluded, or just not succeeding in the education system. So I think we really need to pay attention to this, and we really need to see, how are our children in care, how are they getting on in the school system, and is our school system meeting their needs? And if they're not, we need to address that, and we need to address it as a matter of urgency.
All your experience shines through. It really does.
You're listening to the Stories from Foster Care podcast. Be sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts.
You're offering training at the moment to the educational system, to teachers, principals, I guess, as well. Can you talk a little bit about that? And what has kind of motivated you to offer it?
As a foster carer, again, the Foster Care Association has offered really good training to foster carers. And in 2016, I did a course with Christina Enright, child psychotherapist, who had been offering training on parenting the hurt child. And I did that training as a foster carer, and I was sitting there as a foster carer thinking about my own children, who had been with me no more than 10 years at that stage. But what kept coming into my head were children in my own school, and you know, very clear that this very much applied to them, the disruption to attachments, that the impact that has on their behaviour, on their learning and on their relationships. And I thought, well, you know, you do a little bit of work on attachment in pre-service, and I know it has changed now since I went there. That was a very long time ago. I am retired now, so it's a very long time since I was in College of Education. But I think it's not really enough, and I do think it's an ongoing journey. It is a lifelong journey, and any parent who's ever done a parenting course will tell you, yeah, you can't ever do too many parenting courses. You know, a good parenting course is one worth repeating at a different stage in your life, in your child's life. So I thought teachers really need to have access to this type of training. So I approached Christine, and she was very open to it. And Christine and myself developed training for teachers, which we're continuing now with some excellent, some really wonderful schools over in Finglas with the Bernardos and the Better Finglas project. And they're working to develop policies and practices to become nurturing schools and trauma-informed schools. And also involved in teacher training. Now with Mary Gordon, a retired NEP psychologist, and we're offering trainings on becoming a trauma-informed school through the Dublin West Education Centre. So there's huge demand for it. There's huge hunger for it. Teachers know. They know because they are met with this in the classroom, and you know they're highly motivated to develop connections with their children because they know that the children won't learn unless they have a connecting relationship with the teacher. So otherwise, I mean, I think teachers really learnt this at the time of the lockdown when children were trying to learn online, that it is the actual relationship with the teacher that is the crucial intermediary between the child and the learning task.
What kind of things are you teaching the teachers about trauma? What are they learning? What do they need to learn, do you think?
Well, I think really what they need to do is, I think they're already, anybody really who comes on those courses is already coming in with a lot of knowledge and understanding and insight. So I think it's about self-awareness. It is about really understanding how, we all know it, and we all know that, trying to reason with a child who's highly stressed and having a meltdown as such, that is absolutely useless. And yet we've all done it, and we will do it again. We do it at home, we do it in our relationships, we shout at people, calm down, would you calm down? It's the most useless piece of advice anybody can give to anyone. And yet we do it. It's our kind of our default practice. But I think deep down in our gut, we know that when you're in that agitated and stressed state, that you're not listening, you're not able to access language, you're not able to reason, and you're not able to make rational decisions and good choices. So I think it is about teachers. So getting teachers to really understand how that works in the school, how it works in the classroom, that children who are really, I suppose, would have been classified before as very challenging, just to see that behaviour as a communication of high stress and possibly developmental trauma. It's not always developmental trauma, and I think we have to be careful now, especially in post-COVID times, that not every child who has come through a stressful period during COVID has suffered developmental trauma. Developmental trauma is really about the early experience of serious neglect or abuse. And that while some children have experienced stress during COVID, they will bounce back from that. They will develop resilience from that because they have been involved in relationships with adults, and the adults were in a position to repair those ruptures that happened at the time when the stress happened during COVID. So for most children, and I'm talking about most children, even if they were through quite a stressful period, I think as parents, as teachers, we have to be confident to know that it will be okay for those children. We just have to remember, look, I did lose it. I was stressed. I was not listening to you. I wasn't spending proper time with you. I was distracted. But it'll be okay. I'm here for you now, and I can repair it. But for children, for other children, they have experienced serious developmental trauma where that repair hasn't happened, habitually hasn't happened. It hasn't happened often enough. I'm not saying it never happened, but it hasn't happened often enough, and that has resulted in developmental trauma. And so I think we teach, that's what we're working with teachers on. They know this because they see it in their classroom. They see these children who are very hard to reach, children who are very evidently very able and yet are not succeeding in school. They're not able to concentrate, they're not able to sit down, they're not able to form good relationships with their peers, they're not able to use the teacher's support appropriately, and they are highly disruptive to teaching and learning, and they have an effect on the teacher. And this is the bit that I'm really, really interested in, and I think, what I always say to the teachers, look out for the child that you find it hard to like. Because if you find it hard to like them, well, that's telling you something. And, you have to look at why you find it hard to like them. It's not because they know that these are just children, and children want and need your approval. They want your love and your care. And so I think if you reach inside yourself, you'll realise why it is that you're kind of thinking, why are they hard to like? And what has happened to this child to make them like that? And I think, there are things you can do. There's very simple strategies you can do that can change that dynamic, and that it can change it really quite quickly. I think there is the whole thing of reminding yourself all the time, this is a child. And this child needs my care. They need my attention. So you can call it fake it if you make it, until you make it. Or you can say, okay, just remind yourself going into this, I am the adult and I am going to care for this child. And if you get that message across to the child in your tone of voice, in the little things you do, in how you behave with them, without expecting any good behaviour back, I think eventually the behaviour will come back, because the child will see that you are trying to connect with them. The child will see that you are meeting the needs of the child in them. And so they no longer have to survive. You are there to help them manage in the world.
Yeah, and it just strikes me that can take a long time.
Yes, yeah. It can take a long time, and it can be very threatening. It can be very threatening for us as adults. And I think for us as teachers, that is a risk, because it can make you very stressed. It's very exhausting. And like you say, it can feel futile. So yes, I think you have to reassure yourself. You have to find your way of supporting yourself over your lifetime. I think you have to nurture your own relationships at home. I think you have to find your joy in life. I think you have to enjoy life outside of this, but that when you go in, that you can give it your all, but that you don't necessarily take it away with you in your head. And I think that's an issue that I'm interested also in conveying to teachers, that, that is, and I know that the RCSI last year ran an excellent course on stress management and mindfulness. And one of the things they spoke about was the difference between compassion and empathy. And, whereas before, I think we always talk about empathy, and empathy is where you want to get, but they're saying there is a danger if you empathise, if you overly empathise and you actually think yourself into the misery of the other person or the trauma of the other person, to the extent that you actually feel their trauma and you feel their misery. But I think it's very important that you realise, actually, I have a good life. I am able to stay in my adult place. I am not going to go back into my stressed position. I'm going to stay in my adult place, and I am going to live life with joy and see the beauty that's in the world. And I think that is a hard thing at the moment. I think with COVID, with climate change, we're all very, very aware that the world is a very problematic place at the moment. But just to remember that there is still beauty in the world, and there is still kindness in the world, and to make ourselves, to help ourselves experience that, so that we can deal with children who have experienced terrible things and are still experiencing terrible things, to have compassion for them and to be able to meet them with a full heart, but not to take on their misery, because the world doesn't need any more miserable people. So we do have a responsibility to be able to not take ourselves too seriously, and to go off and have a laugh, and to nurture our own friends and our own friendships and our own relationships and our own love of nature, of joy, of beauty, wherever we can find it in our lives.
I think I heard somewhere the difference between compassion and empathy is that empathy is I'm in your suffering with you, and compassion is I'm accompanying you, I'm with you as you're experiencing it.
Yeah.
And whatever we can do to help ourselves to be in that place rather than to become overwhelmed ourselves, because we all have, to greater or lesser degree, our own trauma, also. Or would you see that we also have trauma that gets activated?
Absolutely. And I think, again, as parents and as teachers, what we try and do is solve it. And that can be very alarming for the children, and very alarming for and especially for teachers in school. The children are going home sometimes to really difficult home situations, and so you can't control that. All you can do is be there for them at the time that you are with them, and like you say, accompany on their journey, and let them know that they are really met when they come to school. Let them know that they are cared for, and that they are liked, and that they can make the teacher laugh. I think that's one of the things that I miss most since I retired, is just laughing with the children. They can really make you laugh, but for them to see that they can really make you laugh, I think is important. So yeah, I think not entering into their misery, but being on their journey in a compassionate way. I think that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. And you may have answered this already, but when you're emphasising self-care and our own friendships and taking care of ourselves, but is there any advice you would offer somebody who is thinking of fostering?
Yeah, I do. I think about what your support network is, and I think resilience really isn't about what's inside the person. And I think we can often be kind of reaching inside and think, oh, I'm a really strong person and I should be a really strong person. You're really only as resilient as the community around you. So think about your community. Think about who is in your extended network that is going to support you in your fostering journey. So is that going to be family? Is it going to be friends? It doesn't have to be a big circle, but I think you need more than one person or a couple. You do need a circle. And it may be other foster carers, but it may be your own extended family. So I think that's really important. And I think you have to trust in yourself that it's okay to make mistakes, because you will make mistakes. It's okay to feel at the end of your tether, because you will feel at the end of your tether. I think, that's the only advice I'd say. It is worth it, but it's not easy. So I wouldn't have any illusions. I wouldn't say to people, don't think you're going to change the world. And there are systemic issues, I think, that everybody will find, they'll come up against very quickly and very sharply. So again, to be able to find your support wherever you think it is at the moment, and then reach further. So just realise you're going to need lots and lots of support when you are fostering, to stay in your adult place and to really reach back for your own strengths and your ability ability to face into the next day, which may be very, very tough. And you may have days and weeks and months of very difficult times. And so just to kind of realise that without panicking about that, and say, look, okay, you do need your time off. You do need to be able to enjoy life. My children probably kill me over this, because it makes it sound as though we had a terrible time with them. And actually, we had lots of good fun with them. So if they listen back to this now, I'm not talking about them. So when I was doing the circle of security training, because we did it during lockdown, we were the first ones. And normally you'd be doing it in group situation, and there would be a lot of group analysis of your own, what they call your own shark music. That's what they call emotional baggage or background challenges in attachments. So you do a lot of investigation of that while you're training as a circle of security parenting facilitator. But because I couldn't do it with the group, I had to do it in my family situation. So I had to do it with my children, who I had made all our mistakes on. And I can tell you, they were merciless in pointing out our mistakes and what we had done wrong, and how many times we had messed up. So I think all I can say is we're still together, we're still talking, and we do manage to laugh together quite a lot. So we have survived that, and they were, like I say, they did come, and they are just looking for. So I think I would recommend you. This is a very long-winded answer to your question. I would say to people, don't be put off fostering. You know, I would be very anxious for somebody if I knew a friend of mine was thinking of fostering. I'd be anxious for them, because it is a huge task. And some of the children that are taken into care now, they are taken into care very late in their journey, and very late after, a substantial amount of neglect or abuse or traumatizing experience. And that can be very difficult then for foster placement. So I think, it's easy to say be confident. I don't think it's actually possible to be confident, but it is important to kind of recognise if you are really struggling, where your supports are, and to draw on those supports and not think too far ahead.
Yeah, that's really helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you. So we're coming to the end of our conversation. You've said so much. And you've such a perspective and such a breadth of experience. It's wonderful to hear you're offering this training in schools now, that it's that other people are benefiting from your experience as well, as I know people listening to this podcast will. So, Anne, thank you very much for being with us today. Thank you.
Thanks, Niamh.
It was great to catch up with Anne. She has so much wisdom and experience to offer the fostering community. A couple of things Anne mentioned that you might be interested in finding out more about is the Circle of Security parenting model. For more information about that, go to circleofsecurityinternational.com. And Anne also mentioned the stress management and mindfulness course at the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland. To find out more about that, go to rcsi.com and search up the Centre for Positive Psychology. Thanks for listening. And we look forward to you joining us again on the Stories from Foster Care podcast. Remember to subscribe to Stories from Foster Care on Nearcast, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts.